In 2005, Dragon Ball GT Transformation would be the final game from American game developer Webfoot Technologies, having sold their share of good games like the Legacy of Goku 2 and Boost Fury, and really bad games like the first Legacy of Goku and Taiketsu. GT Transformation would deviate a bit from the top-down RPG elements of the first three Legacy of Goku games, instead transforming into a classic beat-em-up similar to titles like Streets of Rage. However, despite its final working title, the game was initially in production as Dragon Ball: The Legacy of Goku 4 and planned as a two-part game covering the story of GT. And this two-part plan was advertised everywhere, even following its official name change to GT Transformation. And so it was surprising that we never actually received the final game of the series. Well, luckily, a giant collection of production-level design documents from the development of GT Transformation was recently archived, which included concept pitches around this mysterious title, like the Legacy of Goku V, otherwise known as Dragon Ball GT Transformation 2. And wow, there's a lot of cool information on how they were planning on changing up the formula with the next game. The game would pick up after the last game's conclusion, starting at the Super 17 and Shadow Dragon arc, with the series now covering the entirety of the GT series, minus the Heroes Legacy TV special. The 31st World Tournament that served as a break between the Baby saga and the Super 17 arc was going to be used as a tutorial where the characters could learn their controls. The most major change to the gameplay was now up to 3 ally characters could be on the battlefield at once, with the player able to swap between them with the press of a button, similar to in the Tales games or the more recent Final Fantasy remake. And this was supported by a bunch of new playable characters, including Goten, Gohan, Super Saiyan 4 Vegeta, Gogeta, Nova Shinron, and apparently Chi-Chi wearing pots and pans for armor. Chi-Chi is probably the funniest of these potential characters to play as, but definitely a welcome addition. Goten, Trunks, Gohan, and Oob are unlocked earlier in the game in order to fight against the enemies released from Hell, with Vegeta being unlocked during the Shadow Dragons arc. You'd be able to customize your 3-man team, which is guided by the fact that each character has their own special abilities and quirks. For instance, apparently Nova Shinron would have the ability to create a large lens, which would increase the size and power of any energy attack that passes through it. Also, since his body temperature is 6,000 degrees Celsius, enemies will be hurt simply by touching him. Team members would learn new moves through a reward tree similar to in an RPG, which is something the original Dragon Ball GT Transformation lacked. Interestingly, the design document implies that there would be puzzles to solve across each level, which wasn't really the case for the original Dragon Ball GT Transformation, which was a pretty straightforward beat 'em up. Each stage would have multiple routes that could lead to specific drops and just overall increased playtime. This seems especially important during the Shadow Dragon arc, as Goku and the crew would have to search for parts for Bulma to allow Vegeta to transform into Super Saiyan 4 during the fight against Shenron. A random feature that I saw is apparently there were plans for controllable flight, allowing characters to fly around the level. I'm not sure how they would have made that work, given the perspective that the transformation games are set in. I think it would have worked for a side-scrolling game like Dragon Ball Advance Adventure better. Multiplayer sounds pretty ambitious too, with an advertised max of 4-player multiplayer and secret bonus levels that require cooperation to complete. The lack of screen real estate doesn't exactly make this sound feasible, and finding 4 gamers with link cables in 2006 was just not going to happen. It doesn't seem like this feature would have been worth the squeeze, honestly. All things said though, the development team was aiming for 15 hours of gameplay, which seems pretty ambitious given Transformation 1 could be beaten in about 4 hours if you really knew what you were doing. But this could account for the different modes and unlocking all additional items. Something that I thought was weird was that Dragon Ball GT Transformation 2, and by extension the first game, were apparently actually running on the same engine as the original 3 Legacy of Goku games. The design doc also mentions a Dragon Ball GT intro video similar to the animated intros that we got with the Legacy of Goku's 1 and 2. These were always really cool to me on the Game Boy Advance, especially back before handheld devices like the PlayStation Portable or Nintendo DS that could easily incorporate them. If the game had continued development, I assume it would have quickly been promoted to a DS game, as many Game Boy Advance games around that time did. The increased RPG aspects would benefit greatly from the DS's second screen, and the simple wireless of the Nintendo DS meant multiplayer wouldn't be as much of a hassle. It's a shame that we never got Dragon Ball Transformation 2. We had the chance to have every arc of Dragon Ball from the very beginning to the final episode of GT playable on the Game Boy Advance. Well, aside from the Piccolo Jr. arc, that is. Maybe one day they'll revisit this formula and give us a beat-em-up revival similar to the recent Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle games. Dragon Ball has been doing a good job at giving us a good variety of gaming experiences recently, so I don't think it'd be that too far-fetched. Anyway, that's my look into this little lost piece of Dragon Ball gaming history. I've got a lot of topics to talk about, but if you have any ideas on what you want to see next from me, go ahead and leave a comment and also subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, guys, and bye.